Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph, starting with Nun Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. The Gemara continues discussing minhagim and the requirement to fulfill established customs. Says the Gemara, Bnei Baishon Nohug Deloy Havu Azlin Mitzur Tzidoin B'Male Shabboto. The people of Baishon, they were noiheg not to travel on a boat from the city of Tzur to Tzidoin on Erev Shabbos. Now, there's a brisa that's taught in Masechet Shabbos that says that one should not embark on a boat 3 days before Shabbos. However, it says from the city of Tzur to the city of Tzidon, since they are next to each other, one, yes, may embark on that boat to go from one to the next on Erev Shabbos. So it says over here that the people of Baishon, they were careful not to even do this on Erev Shabbos, even though in the city of Tzidon, there's a Yom HaShuk, a marketplace day. Says the Gemara, Osu benayu kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. The children, meaning future generations, then came before Rabbi Yochanan. Amru lo, they said to him, Avhasin efshar luhu. Our forefathers who established this minhag, they were able to then sustain such a minhag because they had money, they had wealth. They didn't have to then go to the marketplace on Erev Shabbos. However, anon loy efshalon. But we are not in a position to then avoid the marketplace. We need the money. Omar lehu, he said to them, Kvar kiblu avoseichem aleihem. When your forefathers established the minhag, they established the minhag also for their seed, for their future generations, for children that will come afterwards. And therefore, since it's an established minhag, you have to follow it. Shneimar, it states in the pasuk, Shma b'ni musar avicha. Listen, my child, to the musar of your father. Ve'al titoish taras imecha. And do not abandon the Torah of your mother. The Gemara now tells us about another minhag. This time it's established by people who are unlearned. B'nei chuzoi nahagu demafreshei chala ma'ar roiza. They establish a minhag to take challah out from rice. Now, the requirement to take challah, a portion of the dough, and give it to the kohen, is a requirement that is with 5 of the grains, the 5 grains of wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. They were machmir on themselves to also take challah out from rice. So the Gemara says, Osu va'amru le Rav Yosef. They came before Rav Yosef, other people who heard of this minhag, Amr luhu, and he said to them, Nichlazar ba'apayu. Have a non-Kohen eat this that they called challah from their rice, bread. They took out from the dough that they were made for rice bread, as they established to be challah, and have a non-Kohen, which normally a non-Kohen cannot eat challah, have a non-Kohen eat that, what they are calling challah, to display that it's not challah at all. In other words, what they did is inconsequential. It has no value whatsoever. Abai challenges, and he says, Dvorim hamutorim va'acherim nogu ban iser. Things that are mutter and others are machmir to make it osir. On Daf Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph at the top, I'ato rashoy lahatir b'fneim. Abai says that the brisa says you're not allowed to then be matir in front of them. So how can you, Rav Yosef, instruct them to have a non-Kohen eat this challah, what they call challah, in front of them? Hare, they are noheg iser, and you are now then displaying heter. Omar loi, Rav Yosef responds to Abaye, V'lav mi itma Allah. Was it not stated in this principle that you just quoted me, that which is mutter and people are noheg iser, you're not allowed to then matir in front of them? What was it stated? Amar Rav Chizda b'kutoi. That's talking about the kutoi. And according to the opinion of the Tana that says that the kuta, in this case the kutoim, the Kutites are Jewish, which itself is a machlekes, and they are not careful with mitzvahs. So therefore, then you cannot display that which they are doing is really mutter in front of them, because that might lead to then iser on meikar hadin. So Gemara says, Kutai my taima. The Gemara says, why is that true, that you cannot go ahead and be matir in front of the Kutoim, the Kutites, iser, that they are establishing iser for themselves? Again, mishum de misarche milsa, because it may lead to then a leniency of that which they will then do iser meikar hadin. If that's so, says the Gemara, then hanach nami sarche milsa. These people also who are taking out challah from dough of rice, they also will be led to then doing iser. In other words, they will then meikar hadin may not take challah out from the 5 grains. So therefore, again, how can you go ahead and matir that which they are noheg iser? Elo Rav Ashi, rather Rav Ashi says the way to handle is as follows. Chazina, let us see. Iruban oirez ochli. If the majority of the people eat rice bread, then lo nichla zar ba'apeh. Then you should not have a non-Kohen eat that which they're calling challah in front of them. Dilma mishtakcha taras challah minayo, because maybe then it will lead to them losing or forgetting the whole inyan of taking out challah from ikar adin, from the 5 grains. V'i ruban dalgan achli. But however, if they are in the majority eating from the 5 grains, that's their bread, nichla zar ba'apeh, then a non-Kohen should, yes, go ahead and eat in front of them what they're calling challah from rice dough. Because dilma osi lefushi min achiyuv ala ptur umin aptur ala chiyuv. They might then come and take one from the other one. In other words, even though they will, let's say, need to take from challah from the dough of the 5 grains, but they'll take it from the rice, or vice versa, whereby really, since it's inconsequential what they're doing, it'll be tevil. They didn't truly take out challah, and therefore you have to then show them and display in front of them that which they're being noeg iser is really mutter. The Gemara brings back the statement that we just brought in the name before, gufa dvarim hamutarim v'achem naogu b'han iser, that which is truly mutter, but they are machmir upon themselves to then noeg iser, then you're not allowed to then tell them that it is really mutter. Omar Rav Chizda bikuto yaskinon. So Rav Chizda established this to be in front of the kutoim. If the kutoim are machmir upon themselves, a certain heter they make themselves iser, then Rav Chizda established one has to then be careful not to be matir in front of them, because it will lead to then iser meikar hadin. Ask the Gemara, vekuli amaloi, only the kutoim, but everybody else not. Says the Gemara, we have a following brisa that seems to show otherwise. V'hatanya, it states in the brisa 3 different examples. First one being roi chatzin shnei achin ke'echad, 2 brothers who bathe together. Ve'ein roi chashin shnei achin bekabul. It's permissible for 2 brothers to bathe, certainly naked, together. However, in the city of Kabul, they were careful to noheg iser even when it comes to 2 brothers. Now, what would be the chashash? Since you have one brother seeing the nakedness of the other brother, and they live in the same home, maybe that will lead chalila to a impermissible act. So we're not worried about such a thing. However, in the city of Kabul, they did noheg iser. The 2 children of Rabbi Gamliel did bathe together in the city of Kabul, not knowing that in the city of Kabul they were noheg iser. And the people spread gossip against these people, against these children who were then who bathed together. They said, we never saw such a thing. V'nishmat Hillel v'yotz lebeis hachitzoin. And Hillel, one of the brothers, he left the bathhouse where he was together with his, bathing with his brother, and he went to the outer bayis, so that he would not be alone with his brother bathing. It shouldn't be a problem. And he did not want to say to them that, in fact, it is mutter. So we see, first of all, right, in this first case, so far, that it is, even not in front of Kutaim, a problem to then matir, that which they were machmir upon himself, iser. A second case, says the Bryce, Yoitzim bekardigisoin b'Shabbos. These are shoes that they would put on their feet that were not, they were loosely fit on their feet. And here there's a concern that if they were to fall off, one might then carry them Dalit Amos in the Rishus HaRabim. So it says, Yoitzin bekargedusin b'Shabbos ve'en yoitzin bekargedisun b'Shabbos bebeirei. They were permitted to then use such shoes in a regular place, but in the city of Beirei, there they were noheg iser. Similarly, the children of Rabbi Gamliel, it was Yehud and Hillel, sheyotzu bekargedisoin b'Shabbos bebeirei. They did go in these shoes in the city of Beirei, not knowing that in the city of Beirei they were machmir. People were speaking, they were spreading gossip about them. They said, we never saw such things. And here we see that they took off their shoes, they quickly gave it to their servants, as not to then be able to then have them say that what they're doing is wrong, instead of them telling them that it's truly mutter. So again, we see in a second case, over here in the Braisa, that in itself, even though they're not kutoim, they did not want to say to them that that which they're noheg iser is really mutter. A third case the Braisa brings now. V'yoishvin al safsali nochrim. Safsali nochrim is that which the nochrim, the Gentiles, would use for commerce. These type of safsalim, these type of benches, they would use to then do their commerce, their trade, their merchandise, selling merchandise with. So it says over here, Yoishvin al safsali nochrim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to sit on these benches on Shabbos. But in the city of Akko, they were noheg iser. So normally it would be a problem, normally it would be mutter, because we're not concerned that a person will think that you're doing commerce on Shabbos, but in Akko they were machmir. So it states over here, and they were speaking about him that he was sitting on these benches in the city of Akko. And it states over here, Amru, they said, Miyamenu Lorenu Kach, we never saw such a thing. In other words, our minhag is not to then sit on such benches. We are noheg iser on Shabbos. Nishmat al gabe karkov lerotz loymer lehen mutorin atem. And here the Braisa concludes his third case and says that he quickly got off the bench and sat on the floor. And he did not want to tell them that in truth it is mutter. So here we have three different cases again, where we did not want to then tell those who are noheg iser that it's mutter, even though they're not considered to be. These are not kutoim. Answers the Gemara, B'nei bedinas hayom nami, kivan de lo shchichi rabbonan gabayu bekutim damu. Since in Medinas Hayam, where these places were situated, this talking even the Akko, the area of Akko that's not considered to be Eretz Yisrael, it's outside. Here is saying that they didn't have Rabbonim that were shchichi, that were present, and therefore it wasn't learned. They didn't have people to then Rabbonim over there, and therefore they were considered to be like Kutim. If you would then matir the Isser in front of them, by that they were noheg Isser, it could lead them to then being over Isurim that are Mi'ikar Hadin. Gemara says now, explaining that Braisa that we just quoted, Bishlam Safsali Nochrim. We understand why Safsali Nochrim might be a problem, because Mishum de Mechzi Kemekachomemka. It appears that the person who's sitting on it is doing business dealings, and therefore they were noeg iser. So we understand why they were machmir on themselves. Bekur de gihisoin nami dilma mishtalfin va'os lasuyin arba amos yisharabim. When it comes to these shoes that are loosely fit, we also understand why they're noeg iser, because they might fall off, and a person might carry it, Dalit Amos, Nirshus Arabim. My time aloi, but the bathing of two brothers, why is that Noheg Osir? Why were they Noheg Osir in the city of Kabul? Kedetanya. It states in the Brisa, Im Hakol Adam Roichetz, with every person you're allowed to Roichetz, Chutz Mei Aviv, with the exception of one's father, Vechamiv, and his father-in-law, Ubal Imoy, and his mother's husband, Ubal Achoisoi, or the husband of his sister. Rabbi Yehuda Matir, Ba'avim Nekvoda Aviv. Let's take a look at Rashi. What is the reason why a person cannot bathe together with his father or his father-in-law? Says Rashi, Me Aviv V'chamiv, Mitoy Shero'ehu, V'nizgar Shemishom Yatza. Because if he would see his father's nakedness, he might have hihurim and realize that's from where he came out from. Noisein libo lehirhur. He might come to then think that improper thoughts. V'chein b'chamiv. Similarly, when it comes to his father-in-law, he'll then look at his father-in-law's erva and think to himself, hihurim, where his wife came from. Says Rashi, V'chein b'chamiv noisein libo sheyatzasa ishto mikan. It will also lead to hihurim. So all this is to avoid improper thoughts. Al Kapani, Rabbi Yehuda is matir, because he says, when it comes to your matir be'avi, because sometimes he says your father needs you to meshamesh him. So a kavod aviv is goiver over the fact that you don't want to lead to improper thoughts because he needs you to mechabed him in the bathhouse. Al Kapani, it says over here, v'uadin lebal imoy. And also when it comes to the husband of his mother. Says the Gemara now, V'osu inhu v'gozu b'shnei achim mishum bal achoisoi. Since bal achoisoi is a problem, it might lead to improper thoughts. So therefore the people in the city of Kavul were concerned that it also then will lead to improper thoughts. And therefore they made a gezerah and said a boy cannot then bathe together with his brother. Tana, the Gemara brings a brisa in regards to the bathhouse. Talmi lo yirchatz im rabbi. The brisa adds a student cannot bathe together in the same bathhouse at the same time as his rebbe, because after all, he has to have the proper kavod and awe and respect for his rebbe, and he doesn't want to lose that by seeing him in the bathhouse. V'im rabbi tzorich lo mutar. But again, if his rebbe needs him to meshamesh him, then it's considered to be goiver and it's mutter. Says the Gemara, the following case, Ki also Rabbi Bar Chana, when Rabbi Bar Chana came from Eretz Yisrael to Bovel, Ochel da'aitra, he ate a certain type of fat that was on the yeser. There's improper fat that's prohibited, that's on the keshes, the curved area of the animal. And he ate from the yeser, which is mi'ikir adin mutter to eat. It's permissible to eat such fat. And that's indeed what they used to do in Eretz Yisrael. So when he came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, in Bavel itself, he was eating this fat. That was really permissible, mi'ikir adin. But in Bavel, they were careful not to eat it. So it says, Ul legabe Rav Avio, Saba Rabba Breid Rav Huna. When Rav Aviro, Saba, and Rabba Breid Rav Huna came to visit him, here in Bavel, Kivan the Chazinu Kasya Minai. Once he saw them approaching, he covered it up. They shouldn't see that he's eating such fat, which again is mutter mi'ikar adin, but in Bavel, they were noeg iser. Also, Vamru Leila Abaye, they came before Abaye and they told him what had happened. Omar Lehu, Abaye said to them, Shavinchu kikutoi. He is comparing you, he's treating you like kutoim. As we said before, the kutite, that when they are noheg iser, then it's osir to then be matir in front of them, even though mi'ikar, then it's mutter, because it may lead them to then do iser. So too over here, instead of being noheg, instead of treating you like talmidei chachamim, which it would be mutter, to go ahead and matir in front of them, in this case to eat the fat, permissible fat in front of them, he was careful to cover it up because he treated them like kutayim, and therefore he didn't want them to then lead to an isser. So he was being careful to then make sure that he was not matir their isser in front of them. The Rabbi Bar Chana Lesleiha asked the Gemara, but still, he who was eating this permissible fat, but he was not then careful to then follow the minhag of the makom in Bavel. This now, behold, it states in our Mishnah, Noisnin alav chumrei hamakom sheyatzu misham v'chumrei hamakom shalach l'sham. Our Mishnah tells us that when a person goes from one place to another place, even though in his place they are mekil, when he goes to the place where they are machmir, so he has to then follow the chumrah of the place that he is situated in, and therefore over here too. Since even though in Eretz Yisrael they eat such fat, but since in Bavel they do not, he should have been noheg iser. So why was he eating this fat in Bavel? Answers the Gemara. Omar Abaye. Abaye explained, Hani mili. When is this principle true that's stated in the Mishnah? When you go from Bavel to Bavel, one town in Bavel to another town in Bavel. Ume Eretz Yisrael, or from one town of Eretz Yisrael to another town of Eretz Yisrael. Inami mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael, or you go from a town from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. In all of these cases, you have to noeg iser. You have to be noeg the chumrah of either place. Aval me Eretz Yisrael to Bavel loy. But from going from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, like in this case, then you don't have to be. Why? Since we are koifef to the people in Eretz Yisrael, because in Eretz Yisrael the Rabbanim have smicha, so therefore we're kafuf to them, we're subordinate to them. Therefore, there's not going to lead to machloikis. We understand that in Eretz Yisrael that's what's koveya. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi, Omar Rav Ashi says otherwise. He says even when you go from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, you also have to follow the minhag. However, he qualifies. Hani mili, when is this true? Heicha de'ein daitu lach. When he doesn't have intention to return back to Eretz Yisrael, he's going to remain in Bavel. Then he has to follow the makom in Bavel, and he has to be machmir like they do in Bavel. But he planned to return to Eretz Yisrael, and therefore he was able to be noheg the kula of Eretz Yisrael to eat the me'ikar adin, to eat this permissible fat.